Okay guys, this is probably the worst game I have ever played on the PC. Now, I know what you're thinking. How is that even possible? In the face of titles like Scunny Cart, Killablaster, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, even the original PC Mega Man game I covered years ago, which was terrible in its own right, yet somehow Capcom decided to let High-Tech Expressions make a second such game. How could it possibly get any worse? Terrible level design where every level is just a giant maze with pointless dead ends. They included a Tandy graphics mode selection which simply boots into the CGA mode, partly thanks to the fact that most of the levels have water in them. Virtually every boss in this game has the same jump and shoot pattern. I'm fighting a guy named Torchman in a sewer level full of water. Why does Bitman look like Hardman? Or why does Waveman look like Airman? Or why does Sharkman look like that? Yeah, it can get worse. Today's Ancient DOS game is Mega Man 3, and I apologize in advance to the 3 or 4 people on the face of the planet who may like this thing, but quite frankly, this game is so incredibly bad, a part of me is left to wonder if it was intentionally designed to be terrible, especially considering it's not like this was some rushed project or something. The original PC Mega Man game came out in 1990 alongside the real NES version of Mega Man 3, while this travesty debuted in 1992, 2 years later, made more unusual by the fact that this is the second PC game to bear the Mega Man name, not the third. But after doing some research, I think I have a theory as to how this game came to be. See, in the early days of making games, money was king. It didn't matter how good or bad something was, the trick was to sell it. And to that end, marketing was a huge deal. Third-party game companies, unaware of the true reasons why their products were raking in so much dough, were a bit more loose with their licenses. And thus when other hardware companies approached them to produce material for their devices, asking only for the license and nothing more, all the game companies could see were dollar signs. This is the kind of logic which led to the massive number of Tiger Electronics handheld games out there, but it's likely also what led to the PC Mega Man games. The second one in particular bearing the number 3 because that was the Mega Man game everyone was still drooling over. Quite frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if this game sold numerous copies solely because of the name value. But let's face it, looking back on this thing really paints an ugly picture over the game's publisher, and isn't exactly something the game's two-man team of programmer and artist would want to put on their resumes. To put it as succinctly as possible, this game is poorly designed, poorly coded, has uninspired graphics, not to mention blatantly ripped and recycled graphics, no music, something the original Mega Man titles were renowned for, lackluster sound effects, no support for the current graphics or audio hardware of the time, terrible level design where every level is just a giant maze with pointless dead ends, copy-pasted boss mechanics, and to top it all off, missing features which were even in the first PC Mega Man game. Although the DOS version of Mega Man 3 was licensed by Capcom, the only company involved in its development was High-Tech Expressions, and as previously stated, the game was released in 1992. It's a one-player run-and-gun platformer with support for CGA 4-color and EGA 16-color graphics. Though I should point out, too, that just like with the first game, they included a Tandy graphics mode selection which simply boots into the CGA mode and doesn't actually have Tandy graphics support. It only supports the PC speaker for sound effects, and as for its current release date, it's still commercial, and given how bad it is, there's extremely few reasons you'd ever want to hunt a copy down. Actually, there's extremely few copies out in the wild at all, so getting it for sake of collecting may be tricky. To that end, I wasn't able to source a price on it, though another option is to obtain the DOS version of Street Fighter 2, which came with both DOS versions of Mega Man as bonus editions, much to the dismay of everyone. Yeah, we're not even going to talk about the gameplay because it's pretty much identical to the first Mega Man game on the PC, which I already covered. The only major difference is that now, instead of having only 3 robot masters to face, there's now 6. And they're all... Wait, why does Bitman look like Hardman? Or why does Waveman look like Airman? Or why does Sharkman look like that? So yeah, virtually all the Robot Masters are just reworked graphics of other Robot Masters from previous Mega Man games. We're talking pinnacle of lazy design right here. Furthermore, when you select a Robot Master, the game just goes straight into their level without showcasing the boss sprite first, something which pretty much every Mega Man game up to this point had, including the last one made by the same guys who made this one. The first major problem with this game is actually the level design in general. When you take a look at the level design in virtually any Mega Man game, what do you find? You start each level with a section meant to introduce you to 1 or 2 unique things for the level, proceed through obstacles until you encounter a large robot or tricky section which is unique to the level, meant to tie in with the Robot Master's capabilities. You proceed through more of the level, possibly reaching a branching path, but always linking back up to the main route, and after only about 2 to 4 minutes, you reach the boss and have a showdown. To get a good idea of just how much is wrong with the level design in this game, first imagine if every level took twice as long to complete. Now imagine every level is a maze, where you can end up unintentionally backtracking or even find yourself heading into dead ends with nothing in them. Now imagine if every 2 or 3 levels shared content, had no special mini-bosses or obstacles, and used the same enemies every step of the way. Now imagine that because the levels are contiguous, you have absolutely no way of really knowing where you are in relation to everything, let alone how much farther you have to go. Multiply this by 7 and you end up with every level in this game. The enemies are reused like crazy too, and have some unusual design choices. There's only a small number of different kinds of enemies in the first place, and most enemies can be found in most levels, with a couple or 3 enemy types missing from each. But some of the enemies are just plain odd. I mean, first of all, the hard hat enemies are supposed to only take a single shot or up to 3 when they're really hardened. But in this game, they all take numerous shots to defeat. Also, the ant enemies from the first game have been reused and now have cobra heads attached to them. This is wrong on about 1 million levels. Furthermore, just to pile on the oddities, the enemies flash now when you shoot them, but they don't explode when you destroy them. They just vanish, making you wonder if you actually defeated them or not. I should point out, though, that enemies stay defeated once you defeat them, even if you lose a life, so sometimes taking extra effort to destroy something in this game is actually a good idea. Also, to counter the fact that the levels are longer, most have multiple checkpoints, and the enemies do less damage if they hit you. Heck, even spikes aren't typically deadly to the touch anymore, unlike every other Mega Man game ever. The death sequence, though, when you do die, is odd. If you fall out of the level down a bottomless pit, Mega Man is wiped vertically, and then is wiped back into existence at the checkpoint. Kinda makes sense, but if you die from running out of health, the same thing happens. My first thought when I saw this was that maybe they just didn't code the standard death explosion in, except that the bosses have the proper death explosion. So I have no idea why this design choice was made. Continuing on with level design issues, there's a ton of reuse of the graphics between levels, partly thanks to the fact that most of the levels have water in them. And oddly enough, Mega Man can swim now. Now, these swimming sections are mind-numbingly bad, yet are interspersed so much throughout the game, it makes me wonder if the programmer thought he was being clever since Mega Man couldn't swim in any of the other games up to this point. I know it doesn't look that bad, but the controls are horrible. It takes a moment to change between left and right movement, yet you can change up or down movement fairly quickly. You're also constantly fighting inverted gravity while down in the water. Thus, when you get hit, you soar upwards for a moment, often very far from where you wanted to go. To further add to the nonsense, many of these level designs just don't make any sense. I mean, look at this. I'm fighting a guy named Torchman in a sewer level full of water. Why in the world would anyone sane expect a fire-based attack to work properly in an aquatic environment? Oh yeah, this level also has a fairly large number of hidden platforms which are really tough to see, and yet being able to find and jump on them is essential to getting anywhere. Actually, let's stick with the bosses for a moment here. Virtually every boss in this game has the same jump and shoot pattern, the only major exception being Bitman, who attacks and charges, then causes stuff to fall from the ceiling when he reaches the other side. which still isn't original as far as Mega Man boss designs are, but it's about as original as this game gets, so I'll take it. The weapons you get are also all pathetic. They all run out of ammo very quickly, don't do much damage to the regular enemies, can only have a single shot in the air at a time, and most of them just travel straight forwards. The severe lack of imagination going on here is painful. Another thing which bothers me are the new doorways to the Robot Masters, which are like sea vessel hatches. I mean, really, what was so wrong with the Venetian doors which looked and sounded cool when they opened and shut? What was the reasoning behind changing something which was already simple to be more complex, yet in the process less desirable? And there's also two different kinds of turrets you'll come across, neither of which can be destroyed, both of which are annoying to deal with and are used in every single level. As for Wily's Fortress, it doesn't have any level of fun to it and consists entirely of short sections to each Robot Master, then 2 final battles, the last of which, okay, I have to be honest, is almost good enough to be a final boss fight in a regular Mega Man game, as it's simple yet has weapons which are tricky to dodge yet follow predictable patterns. I'm guessing this final boss design was entirely by accident, especially given this end screen, which is just what? Oh boy. This was a real game. I just played it. I just reviewed it. And I just can't believe that it exists. It is so incredibly bad, no matter how you look at it, that its existence begs the question as to whether or not it was intentionally made to be this bad, or if an honest effort was actually being made. I want to emphasize this again. This thing came out in 1992. PC games were far more advanced than this by the time this thing hit the scene. This game was not only made in a substandard way with an outdated engine suffering from speed issues, but it was seriously outdated before it was even started. I can't even begin to recommend this game to anyone, and I suggest if you really, truly must give this game a go, be warned. It's going to be a painful, albeit short, experience. As with the first Mega Man game, there's no way to get this game to run at consistent speed, so the best thing to do is to just set a low fixed cycles count. In the original Mega Man, I used the setting of 600, but for this one, I would actually recommend a setting of 700, just to make it go a little faster due to the increased quantity of stuff being processed in each level. My apathy for this game is so incredible, I don't even know if joystick support works without extra configuration or not. Nor do I care. But really, if you try it and it acts funny, just change your timed intervals setting and see if that helps. Anywho, that's all for this episode of Ancient DOS Games. Episode 164 will be going live on Saturday, June 6th. And as for which game we'll be covering, it's a game about a dog and a bunny. Yep, that one. So be sure to send your guess as soon as you can to adg@pixelships.com, as I'm willing to bet a bunch of you already have an idea of what's coming up next.